Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Joe Patrick on football after a glorious night here at Mercedes-Benz Stadium in downtown Atlanta, where, according to Michael Penix, the Falcons are one of the ones. That's what this win means for this Atlanta Falcons team. That's what the narrative the Falcons players hope will turn into for this franchise, for the guys in that locker room. Ultimately, the narrative is set by people like us in the media, although I wouldn't really consider myself or kind of any of the local media. It's the national media that kind of establish these larger narratives. But that's why it was so important for the Falcons to come out here onto this field behind me on a Monday night football game. You know, national stage, obviously it was a doubleheader going on, but you know, the world was watching all four of these teams that were playing tonight, but especially this one with, you know, premier Bills team that came and visited and ultimately lost to this Falcons team. And it was a deserved win for the Falcons. We're just going to kind of talk on this show tonight with not a lot of notes. I've got some things prepared just of like topics to talk about, but it was just such a glorious night. You hoped that this is what you would get from a Falcons team that's led by a young quarterback that has question marks about it. Naturally, when you have a quarterback like Michael Penix, who going into his 8th start tonight, you know that he's not the finished product. You know that he's, you know, going to be better than he is now down the road. But ultimately, you need him to be good enough now if you want to down the road, reach the goals that you have set for yourself in terms of making the playoffs, winning the NFC South, doing all these different kinds of things. And I think what the team showed tonight was that they are good enough. They are good enough to win these games. I think there's still legitimate questions as to whether, you know, they can go do it again on a Sunday night, and that you know, game is going to be its own test and tell us its own, you know, things for its own reasons when they go and play again in prime time on Sunday Night Football next week, flying across the country to play the 49ers, who are also coming off a loss just like the Bills were. The Bills were, 24-8 under Josh Allen's, in the Josh Allen era, coming off a loss. Well, now they're 24-9. You know, that was like kind of chalked up as this thing. It's like, oh, well, the Bills lost last week, so no way they can lose 2 games in a row. Well, the Eagles lost 2 games in a row after having been 4-0. Now the Bills have lost 2 games in a row after having been 4-0. And it's not like the Bills played terribly. I think the Falcons just played well. They did what they wanted to do. And in that respect, let's start with this Falcons defense and what they did. And we've been talking about it on the show. You know, if you've been a listener or if you followed this Falcons team and some of the narratives kind of coming into the season, I'll just kind of rehash, like, you know, the formula for this team to make the playoffs was for them to have a pretty prolific offense. Let's call it a top 10, top 12 offense in the NFL, and then hope you get a league average defense with these young pieces that they drafted, some of these unknowns like a Divine Diablo. You hope that he was going to be able to come in and kind of fill a role to an extent. Turns out Divine Diablo is pretty exceptional, especially playing in this Jeff Ulbrich defense where he really values the skill set that a player like Divine Diablo brings. He used it in New York where they had a lot of success. And, you know, these guys are fully hitting to the point where this Falcons defense is arguably, right now, as it stands, the best in the NFL, one of the best in the NFL. I mean, there's so many numbers. You can see them on Twitter. And I don't really have them prepared, but I said they've held every opponent so far to under 300 yards of offense, which I believe they're the only team that's like some record or whatnot. I believe they're still number 1 in total defense after this week's set of games. They're number 2 in total offense, by the way, as well, which just goes to show that this offense is starting to click. For as bad as they were against Carolina these last 2 games, and especially it hasn't been the whole game throughout, Washington and then tonight against the Bills. But you have seen some pretty prolonged, portions of the game where this offense is really humming. And it's an offense that's down quite a bit of pieces. And we'll talk a little bit more about that a little bit later. But let's kind of get back to this defense. I mean, Bijan Robinson said it in his postgame press conference that he knew that this defense was going to be different this year based on the fact that he said, at least like what we're seeing now is proof to me that I wasn't tripping in training camp and off season, where I wasn't like busting any of these long runs or having any of these big plays like I typically do. And he's having this year, by the way, against this Falcons defense. And Michael Penix echoed those sentiments, said that first day of training camp, the defense was absolutely flying around. And remember, we kind of were talking, in our training camp shows, and it was like we were kind of expecting the Falcons offense to just kind of be pretty dominant when you talk about whether the defense or offense won or lost the day. But what ended up happening was kind of what they say you hope to see, which is kind of the offense wins the day, and then the defense comes back and wins the next day, and then the offense kind of responds and wins the next day. And that was kind of the flow of how training camp went. And I think that when you look at what the team has put on the field so far this season, that's kind of the way that it's panned out, where both units have clear strengths. Maybe neither are, perfectly well-rounded without vulnerabilities, but what defense or what, units are without any kind of vulnerabilities. So there really are nothing but plaudits, I think, that you have to have for this Falcons defense and what they are this year, but particularly considering the expectations of what you thought. And listen, if the defense is going to be this good or even nearly this good, then that kind of changes that formula that we were talking about with in terms of like how the Falcons make the playoffs, and not only how they make the playoffs, but how good this team can potentially be. Like, what is the ceiling of this team? Nobody was expecting them to have a defense anywhere nearly capable of what they've shown so far, and they've done it all. They've gotten to the quarterback and sacked they've sacked the quarterback, created pressures and sacks. That's obviously a problem that doesn't even need explanation. They're creating turnovers. Saw the game end on a turnover tonight. Obviously, Xavier Watts, the rookie safety, has had his fair share of turnovers, which you hope to see, and that's been fantastic added value, getting that kind of a player in the third round. But they're getting that. They're obviously holding teams to not a ton of yardage. They're actually even stopping the run pretty well. I mean, I think the Bills kind of got away from it a little bit more than they should have in this game. In fact, I was riding in the media elevator down after the game, and there were Bills media in there, and they were complaining about their own team. It was like a little bit unprofessional about like the way that they were kind of fanning out in the elevator there, but they were like, talking about how James Cook wasn't on the field during some important moments. But anyway, the Falcons, the Falcons put the Bills in that situation where they felt like they needed, to do these things, and the Falcons stand up to the task time and time again. I thought it was interesting in this particular game. There was kind of a similar sequence of events that happened in the first half and in the second half. In both halves, you start out the game in the first half, and then to kick off in the second half, not offering much resistance to the Bills' offense at all. They pretty much go right down the field from that goalpost to the one next to me and score a touchdown. It is what it is. It's Josh Allen, right? But then after those touchdowns, I don't know if there were adjustments that were made. Again, we'll talk to Raheem Morris more tomorrow about some of the reasons why this ended up happening. But you got to give so much credit to this defense for stopping Josh Allen and forcing turnovers on downs. That's a forced turnover to create a turnover on downs. Tons of punts, especially in that fourth quarter where you figured that the Bills were probably going to be going for it in some circumstances if they had fourth and shorts, which they did and did not get at times. Forcing them into like fourth and longs where they had to punt the ball away, allowing the Falcons to chew more clock with their running game in that fourth quarter. Just exceptional. And also, another great example of the way that the defense stood up tonight was on a drive in the second half where they get flagged for a couple defensive holdings in the secondary that weren't of which weren't even kind of that relevant to the play, and those are the really annoying ones, especially when they happen on third downs and the team did not, the Bills were not completing these passes to convert on the third downs. So they frustratingly kind of keep the Bills' drives going, and still the Falcons do not bend too much. They bend in the fact that they give up some of those penalties and allow the drives to continue, but they end up stopping the Bills on that particular drive. And I know I'm not alone in thinking that like that's just a mark of a different Falcons football team, because I was getting texts from friends, family who have followed this team for years and decades, following people, just seeing the reaction happening on Twitter, saying, oh, like we've seen this story before, same old Falcons, seen this loss happen a million times where they get off to a hot start, get a decent lead, and let it squander. And that didn't happen. That didn't happen, folks. They actually won this game. And it wasn't pretty in the second half, especially offensively, and we'll talk about it in a second. But that, again, you just have to credit that defense for what they're doing. Jeff Ulbrich, it's not even the scheme so much. I mean, it is the scheme. I don't want to downplay that, but I think even he would say, and he has said this in the offseason, that it's not about me coming in and just having some genius idea that I, thought up over the course of the offseason and am able to teach these guys, and they're able to just go out and implement, and that's what's going to make us a great defense. No, it's allowing the players to use their superpowers. Whatever qualities that these players on defense have, Jeff Ulbrich wants to utilize them to the greatest extent possible, and I think that's why we're seeing the best out of guys like Divine Diablo, who we already talked about, but even Caden Nellis as well is having one of the best years of his career and what is becoming a really remarkable career. AJ Terrell looks great. We talked about Xavier Watts obviously getting the turnovers. Maybe Jesse Bates is like the one guy where you would say like, maybe you expect more, but I don't know. It's like he seems pretty good safety, and the Falcons' pass defense is number one, so I would say that Jesse Bates is having a very good year. You're seeing it from the pass rushers, both the rookies who have been like pretty impressive to this point, but also the second-year guys, Ruka Roro, Brandon Dorless, Zach Harrison, all kind of growing into their own. And I think that you have to give Jeff Ulbrich a lot of credit for allowing them to do that, basically, and putting them in positions to win. And another part of that is the other coaches that he's surrounded by. We've talked a lot on this podcast about Nate Ollie and the attack style front that he's implemented. I would go back, I would really recommend, if anybody wants like more insight into that, to go to the Falcons YouTube channel where they have their press conferences and watch Jeff Ulbrich's press conference this week, where he really kind of gets into, the attack style front and how it's something they're teaching them to do something that they've been literally instructed not to do their entire lives as football players on the defensive line. Just in terms of some of the fundamentals that you're taught at that age to, I was always taught to bench press the guy off you. You grab him by by the chest plate, the steering wheel is what we called it, and then you shed the block. But like that's not how they want these guys playing. They want them playing in a completely different way with different techniques, and they're really taking to it, and it's getting the best out of them. And so that's what's exciting. And I think that there's also, along with Jeff Ulbrich, I had to ask Michael Penix, because Penix actually mentioned him by name, just reference him briefly. Mike Rutenberg, the team's defensive pass game coordinator, who I've always kind of gotten a kick out of him. I haven't really talked to him in a whole lot of detail. I mean, we've done some scrums with him during training camp. You may know who I'm talking about when I describe the fact that he's like always right next to Ulbrich whenever they show them on the cameras on the sideline over there. He's like the shorter guy who's oftentimes like yelling, like just like being like really kind of animated next to Ulbrich. And that is a description of the way that he is as a person as well. And Michael Penix had a really funny quip about him where Penix comes off and says, or Rutenberg tells him, when they're going to the locker room, like, you're a dog. And Penix says, no, you're a dog, to Rutenberg. And Rutenberg says, I effing know I am. And he says how he's like, you can always hear Rutenberg because he's like, even if he's just talking on the phone in the facility, he's like yelling at the person, not in like an angry way. He just talks really loud. And I'll tell you, he's one of the coaches that, like, when we're standing on the sideline as media at a practice, like just kind of standing off to the side, a lot of times he like comes onto the field a little bit late after we're kind of already standing there and the players are already out on the field, and he just like comes by and like says what's up and is kind of just like, engages with us a little bit. And I think that that's just kind of his personality, to engage with these players, obviously, and he just brings so much energy to obviously the defensive secondary, which is kind of in the linebackers, the pass coverage units. But just a really good group of coaches that this team has assembled. And credit to Raheem Morris for, listen, mistakes were made. Many mistakes have been made. But he acknowledged the mistakes, corrected the mistakes, and, not only, like, you can say, like, you correct the mistake by, let's say it by the name, like Jimmy Lake, mistake to hire him. The mistake, the correction is not just to fire him, but it's also to, like, determine why it went wrong and what we need to then bring in that is not going to be a repeat of that. So I don't think that this is a happy accident that this happened. I think that Raheem Morris has been in this game long enough where he understood why this defense was struggling last year. And I think, frankly, it was down to, like, the opposite of what we've talked about, where Jimmy Lake did want to scheme up a lot of things, and he wanted them playing in all these different coverages and, in different moments, and, like, playing everything from a cover 6 to a cover 4 to a cover 9 to a cover 2 man cover, like, throwing everything. And it just gave the defense, they just didn't have any identity. And this current defense just feels a lot more stripped down. Again, trust the players and their superpowers that they have. And we saw it tonight. We saw it work. Josh Allen was looking very frustrated at times tonight. The best player in football is what Bijan Robinson called him, which is kind of funny because Raheem Morris calls Bijan Robinson the best player in football. Bijan says it's Josh Allen. And I believe it's Josh. I mean, this was my first time seeing Josh Allen in person tonight, and my word, the guy's incredible. I know you guys saw it on TV too, but that one incompletion that he had right over there early in the game that was reviewed, it was initially called a completion, then they reviewed it, and it was incomplete. But the throw was ridiculous. It's like a cheat code. And so it just, thinking back to that makes you have even more respect for what the Falcons did tonight, being able to stifle him so much. Yes, a couple of drives, they allowed him to go down and score a touchdown, but they quickly corrected and never really got down on themselves for it. So just a ton of credit to this defense. What they're doing is remarkable, and it really raises the ceiling for what this Falcons team can be this season. If they can play at this level, I mean, who can't they beat? Like, I'm not saying that they're the best team in football, but what I am saying is that they could beat the best team in football on any given Sunday, And so what more can you ask for as a football fan? Let's get to the Falcons offense. It was really obviously a tale of two halves. In the first half, they go into the locker room with 21 points. They scored touchdowns. Again, I don't have the notes in front of me, but it felt like maybe after the first drive, they then went down, scored like 3 successive touchdowns, and were like literally 1 yard from scoring a 4th touchdown to go into halftime with 28 points. Unfortunately, Drake London tried to take that little quick slant to the house instead of going down for the field goal, and just barely could not get there. But Drake was a monster tonight, a target monster for sure. I know in fantasy, because I have him in a league, he had like 30 points. He was fantastic. And tonight was really the kind of game it felt like he really excels in, where the Bills wanted to play a lot of zone coverage, and Michael Penix was just throwing some freaking lasers to him at times, getting in behind that front layer of zone coverage and getting in those pockets for those 15 to 20 yard gains. Really pretty. And that's the thing, if Michael Penix can start to repeat that and be consistent like Kirk Cousins is on a pretty consistent basis, this offense can really start to take off, because I feel like we haven't even really seen a lot of that. A lot of the success this Falcons team had, even against Washington, like, there was not a lot over the middle of the field from Michael Penix to his receivers. There was that one to Drake London in that game, but other than that, I believe that was like the only one over the middle. I think we saw a lot more of it tonight, although I haven't really seen a full passing chart yet. But obviously, Drake was great. I can't believe I led with him to start, because, I mean, Bijan Robinson, like, what more can you say? What do you have, like 238 total yards? He has an 81-yard touchdown run in, what was that, in the second quarter. It was the second longest run or touchdown run in Falcons history, by the way. I don't know. What do you want me to say about Bijan Robinson? I mean, like, the guy can do everything. He talked for a little bit after the game about how he fumbled literally on his first carry of the game. There was a flag offside by the Bills, so didn't count. But it's been a problem with him. It really became a problem at one point, and then it seemed to be corrected significantly. And I'm not saying that like he's got like necessarily it's like problematic for the team. He's phenomenal, but just kind of funny that it happens literally on the first play of the game. But, maybe a good thing that it happens then and not sometime later. And, he said he kind of shored up his fundamentals after that. And that Michael Petrie told him that the only way they were going to be able to stop him in this game was to go for that football. And so he made sure to lock it up. But the guy's ridiculous. We're seeing him really utilize more. And I don't want to brag too much, but we saw exactly what we were talking about in what I was talking about on the pregame show. I've talked about this on some radio hits on 92.9 The Game. Not the pregame show. Well, it was on the pregame show, but on the preview show, the podcast episode that aired earlier on Monday, about how this Falcons offense is continuing to develop and potentially some of the things. So last week was really the kind of the first time in earnest that we saw Zach Robinson utilizing Bijan Robinson out wide as a wide receiver, usually in a bunch set. And I speculated that we could start to see, okay, well, you come out in 12 personnel with Bijan Robinson in a bunch set, but what if you then motion him? So it looks like you're in shotgun, right, with Charlie Warner offset to Michael Penix's right. But what then if you motion Bijan out of that bunch set, then back behind Penix to what was a shotgun look to a pistol look? Well, then when we talk about these tendencies that the Falcons have between shotgun and pistol, then that changes the formula and the calculus for defenders, and they have to kind of react to all of this very suddenly. Particularly useful in this game against the Bills, where they don't have Matt Milano, who's one of their core defensive pieces at that linebacker position. I don't know if he wears the green dot, but certainly a veteran that is a key communicator for them in sorting out some of these things. And so I think the Falcons were able to get Bijan in some really opportunity, some places where they could really get him to excel, and it showed in the stats that he had in this game. And we're also very lucky as football fans that we get to watch this guy every week. I mean, the way that he makes defenders miss, it's so I cover soccer here in this stadium, actually, quite often. But there's a term that you'll hear in soccer that's about players. They want to go out and they want to express themselves. They want to express themselves on the field, and there's something more philosophical to it than just like showing their style of play. It's like their style of play says something about them, and Bijan Robinson expresses himself with his play. Like there's something about Bijan that is expressed in the way that he moves on the football field that is just unique to him, that nobody else can do. And it's not just like juking. It's the ability to make players miss, yes, but then it's also the ability to run with power. It's the ability to catch the ball out of the backfield, out of a split out roll. The ability to do so many different things, and the grace that he does it with, like the grace in which he kind of crosses through the line of scrimmage, the way he moves through a hole. You know what I'm talking about. I don't even know how I can exactly describe it, but you just know it when you see it, which is the description of something else. But it's just beautiful. It's a beautiful thing to watch, and I just wanted to say, just never take it for granted, because the guy is absolutely incredible. Big problem for this Falcons offense coming up is the fact that they lost Jake Matthews in this game. He leaves just before halftime, goes into the locker room just ahead of the team with an ankle injury. He had an ankle injury, I believe it was 2 years ago, or maybe it was last year. Can't remember, but he did end up coming back and playing and continuing his game streak, I believe. We'll see. I mean, that will be tough there, because not only because Jake Matthews is a phenomenal football player, but this team is just depleted at the tackle position. When you've already lost Caleb McGarry, you're already playing kind of a converted guard, I guess you could say, in Elijah Wilkinson at one of the guard spots. You're also out Storm Norton, so you're basically out your top three tackles at this point. I believe, is it Michael Jarrell? I am embarrassed that I'm not certain on his first name, but he comes into play. But he's got some major issues, at least statistically, on his pass protection, PFF grades and such. Was one of the worst in the NFL last year. And I thought that limited the Falcons and what they were, calling. I thought what Zach Robinson was calling was kind of limited by the tackle vulnerability that they had, and they were kind of protecting themselves considering they had a lead. And, I think they'll have to make a move. If Jake Matthews is unable to play, again, it's a short week. It's tomorrow, when the time you're watching this, probably already Tuesday. They don't have a lot of time to get ready for a Sunday night game. And so, maybe Storm Norton will be ready to go. I mean, his timetable would be right around now. But how effective is Storm Norton going to be? Just kind of coming off of injured reserve and then immediately being inserted in the starting lineup at left tackle, no less. Although I guess left tackle is more like right tackle in this system. But definitely a cause for concern. So we'll keep you updated on that this week. Another cause for concern, the kicking game. Woof. Oh my gosh. Parker Romo is blocked right down here. I think he was only on like the 20-yard line here. And terrible kick. I mean, like, I don't want to... He's a really nice guy. We talked as media and such. He's from here. I don't want to berate the guy, but like, it's just not NFL caliber to do that ever. Frankly, like it's just not like, and it's not that he got the kick blocked. It was, if you go back and watch the kick before. I mean, it's a muffed kick. Like it's just a botched kick. It's spinning sideways, coming off of his foot, and the reason it was blocked is because it barely got over the helmets of the offensive line, the protection unit that was in front of him. And it was not going in. If there was nobody there, that kick was not going in. That thing was spinning low, and it was going to go left of those goalposts there. So, and it just, I mean, you cannot have confidence in him now. So we'll see. Ben Sauls has been in camp on the practice squad, who they signed for competition. Is he going to be any better? I don't know. But I feel like if you're the Falcons, the thing that you got to look for in that position is like something that's actually not even about the kicking so much. I mean, yes, they need to make the kicks when they're in practice, but I'm assuming that the guys they train, they all probably make a good majority of their kicks, I think. There's got to be something like inside of them that's like that's like a different level of confidence, because I mean, clearly it's just there's like a mental issue going on, both with Younghoe Koo when he was having his struggles to start the year, and now with Parker Romo. And you hate to see it, honestly. I don't like to see it in an athlete, especially one that I cover. But it is what it is, Like if you can't accomplish what you want to accomplish as a team if you're that poor at that position. And that kind of volatile at the kicking position in the modern NFL. It's just a non-starter. Another interesting one, Ray McCloud was a coach's decision to not have him active for tonight's game, and so therefore you had Casey Washington playing most plays. David Sills was on the field a bunch as this team's third wide receiver. Still, like, Jamal Agnew still is like, I mean, technically he's a receiver, but he's a return guy. It's interesting that he just, like, for whatever reason is not used on offense. But interesting what's happening with Ray. I don't, think we would have been told if there was like a violation of a team policy, or if it was disciplinary for some reason. Strictly like a rule broken or something like that. So I don't think it's that. If I am to speculate about what's going on here, I would say that I think that Ray is taking the Ike Hilliard firing hard. Like, I think that they had a really good connection. Ray obviously broke out as a receiver under Ike Hilliard last year. And I think he really trusted him, really liked him as a person, and didn't like the fact that he got fired. And probably, and maybe for good reason, I don't know. But I just do wonder if that has affected him, where the practice performances just like haven't been good enough, and the team just doesn't trust him to put him out here. So, Raheem Moore says it's the coach's decision, and he will compete this week for a spot to be on the game day roster. So like, these are the kinds of things that lead me to believe that there is maybe like an effort issue, or I don't know, just like some issue that's happening with Ray that is kind of, and I just feel like it could be related to this Ike Hilliard situation, just given the timing of when it's happened and just trying to make sense of it all. So anyway, that's that. That's the bad stuff. The bottom line of this game was that it was just a win that this franchise needed so badly. it doesn't win them anything in and of itself, but I think it has to make every Falcons fan feel like anything is possible. Anything is possible. You can beat any team, even the Buffalo Bills with Josh Allen. And yeah, by the way, yes, Buffalo had their fair share of injuries. They had guys that left this game injured. But listen, we just talked about it. We talked about the injury issues that the Falcons have on that offensive line, how much that was costing them, how thin they are at receiver right now for various reasons. Darnell Mooney missed this game with an injury as well. So it's not like the Falcons weren't without their own injuries. So it was a quality win against a great opponent. They really stifled to the best, almost the best way you can, a potential MVP winner this year in Josh Allen. Just an incredible win for this Falcons organization. I know that Falcons fans are probably ecstatic over. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode of Joe Patrick on Football. We'll be back later this week to talk more about what Raheem Morris is saying, what all the players are saying up there at Flowery Branch as they get ready for the San Francisco 49ers. Another huge game coming up on prime time on Sunday. So until then, take care.